Imagine you're sitting in a classroom in northeastern China. It's a normal Sunday afternoon. Suddenly, the floor jumps. The windows rattle in their frames. For a terrifying moment, you think it's an earthquake, a primal fear that the very ground beneath you has become unstable. But around the world, scientists see the data and their blood runs cold. This was no earthquake. Thousands of kilometers away, military analysts and geologists stare at their screens, realizing that something both man-made and monstrous has just happened. On September 3, 2017, North Korea detonated its most powerful nuclear device ever. The blast was so colossal it registered as a magnitude 6.3 seismic event. But the shockwave was just the beginning. The real story, the one that would unfold in the weeks and months to follow, was what happened to the massive peak sitting directly above the explosion. Because the mountain did something mountains are never supposed to do. It moved. This is Mount Mantap, a rugged, 2,200-meter peak in the remote, mountainous northeast of North Korea. And deep beneath its granite heart lies the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. For over a decade, this isolated complex of tunnels has been the laboratory for the country's apocalyptic ambitions. This was not North Korea's first time rattling the world. It was their sixth nuclear detonation. But the 5 that came before were tremors compared to this. The 2017 test was different. It felt final. A line had been crossed. Just hours after the blast, North Korean state television made a triumphant, chilling announcement. They claimed they had successfully tested a hydrogen bomb, a thermonuclear weapon, small enough to be mounted on a long-range missile. A standard atomic bomb splits atoms apart. A hydrogen bomb fuses them together, unleashing energy hundreds, even thousands of times greater. Outside experts scrambled to verify the claim. The exact yield was debated, but every major analysis pointed to a terrifying conclusion. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, or CTBTO, estimated the yield at around 16 trillion kilotons of TNT equivalent, more than 10 times the power of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. One landmark study published in the journal Science later put the number even higher, a staggering 19.1 kilotons. This single underground blast contained more explosive force than all 5 of North Korea's previous tests combined. It was an event on a historic scale, but the true, unsettling nature of what had occurred was not yet understood. The story wasn't just about the bomb. It was about what that bomb did to the silent stone giant sitting above it. In the weeks that followed, an international team of scientists did something remarkable. They couldn't get to the site, of course. It's one of the most secretive places on Earth. So they used ghosts, they used echoes in the sky. Using a technique called satellite radar interferometry, they compared before and after pictures of Mount Mantap taken from space. This isn't like a normal photograph. It measures tiny millimeter-scale changes in ground elevation across a vast area. What they found was jaw-dropping. Their findings, published in Science, showed that the initial blast was so powerful it pushed the entire surface of Mount Mantap outwards. The western face of the mountain bulged by as much as 3.5 meters, that's 11 feet. But the mountain's ordeal wasn't over. The explosion had vaporized a massive cavern of rock deep underground. The roof of this new artificial cave was now profoundly unstable, and then came the collapse. In the aftermath of the blast, the ground gave way. The surface of the mountain subsided, sinking downward as shattered rock compacted into the void below. Satellite data confirmed the peak of Mount Mantap was now permanently shorter by about half a meter or 20 inches. Let that sink in for a moment. This is not a metaphor. It is not political rhetoric. It is geology. A single man-made device physically and permanently altered the shape of a 2-kilometer-tall mountain. The sheer brutal power required to do that is almost incomprehensible. The mountain had absorbed a blow of cosmic proportions, but it was broken. The first seismic shock was the bomb itself, but it wasn't the end of the story. 8.5 minutes later, instruments around the world detected a second event. It was smaller, registering around magnitude 4.1, and it came from the exact same location. This second shock was the mountain screaming. Scientists widely interpreted this as a massive collapse event inside the test site. The explosion cavity, or a significant portion of the tunnel system leading to it, had imploded. This wasn't just a tremor, it was the sound of a mountain falling down from the inside. The second shock was deeply significant because it suggested the mountain had not contained the blast. It had been shattered by it. The term scientists used was significant subsurface collapse and compaction of already damaged rock. The interior of Mount Mantap was now a mess of fractured, unstable geology, and the mountain kept reacting. In the following months, seismic stations detected at least 4 more smaller quakes in the immediate area. The shattered rock was still settling, the region still adjusting to the violent trauma it had endured. The test site was now tectonically unstable. This revelation shifted the global conversation. The question was no longer just how powerful the bomb was, it was what the damage might allow to escape. When you break a mountain, you create pathways. And when the thing that broke the mountain is a nuclear bomb, the greatest fear is what might use those pathways to get out. The fear that haunted analysts in neighboring countries was radioactive leakage. If the internal structure of the mountain was compromised, if fractures reached the surface, then radioactive elements from the blast could seep into the air, soil, and groundwater. Concern spread like wildfire, especially in Chinese cities along the border. There were reports of people feeling the tremors, of schools being evacuated. The human cost was no longer an abstraction. Now, millions of people were wondering if the very air they were breathing was safe. The evidence for a leak is complex and highly debated. Immediately after the test, Chinese and Japanese monitoring stations found no spike in atmospheric radiation. But that wasn't the end of the story. One multi-technology analysis later noted that detections of xenon-133, a key isotope produced in nuclear fission, in September 2017 did not seem to come from Punggye-ri. However, later detections in October in Russia were consistent with a potential, delayed small leakage from the damaged site. So the honest scientific truth is this: there was not a dramatic Chernobyl-style catastrophe with a radioactive cloud crossing borders. But there were, and remain, very real scientific concerns that the shattered mountain may have released radioactive material in a slow, delayed bleed. The mountain was wounded, and the wound was potentially weeping. And then the story took a turn into the realm of blockbuster disaster movies. Public fear latched onto a new, even more terrifying theory. Had North Korea's test awakened a slumbering giant? This is Mount Pyeongtaek. It sits on the border between North Korea and China, about 114 kilometers from the test site. It is a supervolcano responsible for one of the largest eruptions in recorded human history, the Millennium Eruption of 946 AD. The idea spread like fire on social media and in news headlines. Could a nuclear blast trigger a catastrophic eruption? This is where we need to be cautious. The fear was real, but the science was less certain. An analysis by experts at 38 North, a respected North Korea monitoring project, argued there was no valid basis to expect a contained underground nuclear test to trigger an eruption so far away. The energy from the blast, while immense, dissipates quickly through the Earth, but that doesn't mean the fear was irrational. It shows how profoundly the nuclear test had shaken the region's sense of security. The stronger story isn't that the bomb woke the volcano. It's that the blast was so terrifying it revived our deepest fears about a volcano that experts, for their part, did not believe was truly at risk. It showed that the psychological fallout of the test was just as potent as any physical fallout. 8 months later, in May 2018, the world was invited back to Punggye-ri, or at least a curated version of it. As a gesture of goodwill ahead of diplomatic talks, North Korea invited about 20 international journalists to witness the destruction of the test site. In a carefully managed media event, explosions sealed 3 of the tunnel entrances. It was a powerful political spectacle, broadcast around the globe, a sign, perhaps, that the danger was over. But there was a catch. No outside nuclear inspectors or scientists were invited. No one was allowed to take radiation readings or independently verify the condition of the tunnels before they were sealed. This raised an uncomfortable possibility, one that many experts had already been discussing. Was North Korea magnanimously shutting down a functional site? Or were they just putting on a show, sealing up a mountain that their own weapon had already broken beyond repair? The term used was tired site syndrome, the idea that Mount Mantap was simply too fractured and unstable to safely host another large-scale test. The demolition was a masterful piece of political theater, but scientifically it answered nothing. The story of Mount Mantap is one of the most profound and disturbing tales of the 21st century. It's that with one underground detonation, they appear to have scarred the planet itself. They deformed a mountain, triggered its collapse, and left a broken, potentially leaking site that scientists will be studying from afar for decades. We often talk about nuclear weapons in abstract terms: deterrence, geopolitics, strategy. We see them as tools of power wielded by nations. But Mount Mantap is a stark physical reminder that these weapons are not abstract, their power is geologic. They do not just threaten cities, economies, or ways of life. They can physically alter the ground beneath our feet. They can unmake the landscape. And that may be the most haunting lesson of all. In 2017, North Korea didn't just test a weapon. They changed a mountain and left the entire world to wonder what invisible damage, what radioactive legacy still remains sealed inside it. We look at mountains as symbols of permanence, of stability, of timelessness. But the story of Mount Mantap shows that even mountains can be broken. If this story changed the way you think about what these weapons can do, share it. Because sometimes the most dangerous part of a weapon is not only the lives it takes in an instant, but the silent, unstable legacy it leaves behind, buried deep in the earth, long after the blast is over.